Well, hello, and thank you all for being here with us this morning. My name is Peter Bromberg, and I am the co-chair of the Utah Library Association Advocacy Team. As you all know, I believe, there have been calls for book banning on the rise across our country and as well as here at home in Utah. These efforts are disproportionately focused on the voices and experiences of people of color and members of the LGBTQ plus community. There are also increasing calls to hold librarians, teachers, and school and library board members, both criminally and civilly, liable for making books available, books that are protected by the First Amendment. So today, the Utah Library Advocates have published an ebook to help Utahns understand the role of libraries in protecting their First Amendment freedoms and in providing access to a wide range of ideas and perspectives for all Utahns, as well as our role in preparing students for lifelong success. The ebook will also provide information for parents on how to engage with their children in conversations about what their child is reading. There's a section on frequently asked questions about book challenges, as well as suggested actions that Utahns can take to support the freedom to read and oppose censorship and to learn more about these topics. Lastly, today we are also announcing a petition which is available at the URL saveschoollibrarians.org/Utah. That's saveschoollibrarians.org/Utah. That Utahns can use to let their elected officials know that they oppose censorship and that they support access to books. In addition to the members of the library community who are here today, I'm very pleased that we have a number of community leaders who are here to share their personal perspectives and the perspectives of their constituents on the importance of libraries and the value that we have in providing access to a wide range of ideas, viewpoints, and lived experiences. I'd like to announce our speakers today, and then we will invite them up and hear what they have to say. Our speakers today will be Rita Christensen, who's president of the Utah Library Association. We have Davina Sauthoff, executive director of the Utah Educational Library Media Association. Heidi Matthews, president of the Utah Education Association. Jeanetta Williams, president of the NAACP Salt Lake chapter, is with us. Amanda Darrow, director of Youth, Family, and Education at the Utah Pride Center. Troy Williams, executive director, Equality Utah. Jim Wilson, who's a board member for SchoollibraryPALs. And Liz Pitts, president of LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. And Lehua Parker, who is literary coordinator for the Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resources. So with that, please help me welcome Rita Christensen, president of ULA, to the podium.
Good morning. My name is Rita Baggio Christensen. I am the president of the Utah Library Association. I have worked in academic and public libraries for 20 years, and I'm currently the head children's librarian at the Orem Public Library, which houses the largest children's library in the state of Utah. I've written book reviews, blog posts, and podcasts on children's literature since 1990 and currently write for School Library Journal. Today, I stand before you as a representative of every librarian and every library in the state of Utah. Librarians are united and unwavering in their support of the First Amendment that guarantees all Utahns 5 basic freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of petition, freedom of assembly, and freedom of religion. Of these 5 freedoms, freedom of speech is the key principle that upholds our democracy. Tomorrow, on December 15th, our country celebrates the 230th anniversary of the First Amendment. Now is the time to reflect on the future of free speech and the right to read during polarizing times. Through the babble and bluster of discordant voices, libraries are singular in their patriotic work of embracing the voices of all Americans and resources that inform, enlighten, and provide varied viewpoints. Libraries are essential in safeguarding our democracy. Benjamin Franklin said, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest." Libraries have been investing in Utah's future since the first free public library of Salt Lake City opened their doors in 1898. Our libraries provide communities equal access to information and knowledge. Our libraries improve education, health literacy, and work skills. Our libraries provide windows into the experience of others and mirrors to see ourselves. Our libraries foster early literacy and student success. Our libraries foster civic engagement and community pride. Our libraries play a role as second responders during natural disasters and especially now during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. Our libraries make miracles happen, empower our children, and save lives with that one book that makes a critical connection. Think about the positive interest that has accrued in the last 123 years in our community statewide. It's vast and innumerable. Investing is hard. Utah librarians use their expertise to select diversified and appropriate materials for the age groups and communities that they serve. Yet voices are challenging our investment in knowledge, particularly of diverse selections. Limiting access to information and ideas limits our right to read. It puts the future of Utah at risk, lessening our accrued interest in knowledge and increasing the cost to our communities in the form of misinformation, disinformation, divisiveness, and global business opportunities. Maria Ressa, a Filipino reporter who accepted the Nobel Peace Prize last week, said, "Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without trust, we have no shared reality, with no democracy, and it becomes impossible to deal with the existential problems of our times." Libraries have facts. Libraries have truth. Libraries have trust. The proposition that the voices of the marginalized have no place on library shelves erodes the facts, truth, and trust in libraries, and it erodes democracy. Abandoning constitutional principles, bypassing legal and transparent processes, and ignoring the rule of law while imposing personal, political, and moral values on others is a dangerous pattern that is anti-rule of law, anti-democracy, and anti-American. I'm a parent. My children are now in college. I have Utah principles and priorities of family, faith, hard work, and accountability. I know that it can be frightening to raise children in this tumultuous and changing world, but let's not let fear threaten our libraries and our democratic values. Let's come together as caregivers, teachers, librarians, and leaders to navigate ideas and diverse voices in a way that protects our freedoms and ensures the rights of all individual Utahns are respected and considered. The Utah Library Advocates eBook, which was released today, helps caregivers learn about the importance of libraries and how to talk with their child about books and difficult topics. Every Utahn, regardless of age, enjoys the freedoms guaranteed by the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. The Utah Library Association supports the Supreme Court's recognition that libraries are places for voluntary inquiry and should contain a diversity of ideas, even those that might be controversial to some. Together with our allied organizations, we stand for intellectual freedom and the freedom to read and invite others to do the same. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Rita. Now I'd like to invite up to the podium Davina Sauthoff, who is the Executive Director of the Utah Educational Library Media Association. Davina.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Davina Sauthoff. I am the Executive Director for UELMA, Utah Educational Library Media Association. I've been an educator and a school librarian for 14 years. I am the District Library Supervisor for secondary schools for Granite School District, and I am a parent. UELMA is an organization that is dedicated to supporting teacher librarians in the state of Utah. These highly qualified professionals facilitate student academic learning and a personal development to prepare them for success. The school librarian's role as master teacher, information specialist, and content collaborator encourages reading for information and enjoyment, as well as partnering with other educators to support curricular needs. They continually seek the best practices and strategies to empower students. Research provides compelling evidence that school libraries are profoundly influential on student achievement in schools. Schools that have dedicated teacher librarians have students who read more and are more successful in evaluating information. These devoted professionals support student growth, specifically in the areas of literacy, information literacy, technological skills, and access to online and media resources. Additionally, and as important, library educators curate resources that provide students with connections to themselves, the community, and global perspectives. Not only do librarians face the challenge of ensuring that all students are able to see reflections of themselves in the books they read, but they are also charged with the responsibility of helping students explore worlds outside of their own and develop empathy for others. School libraries and teacher librarians play a key role in the development of each of their students to becoming valuable, critical thinking members of their communities. Thank you for supporting our libraries, our school librarians, and our students.
We're trying to practice good Toastmasters hygiene. Now I'd like to welcome onto the podium Heidi Matthews, President of the Utah Education Association. Heidi.
In 1997, I was a pregnant 30-year-old high school English teacher at Mariner High School in Washington State, when a book that I had assigned for my honor sophomores was challenged. Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings had gone through the rigorous novel adoption committee and had been approved for classroom materials for 10th grade honors English for well over a decade and was on the library shelves in many of the district's secondary schools. The parents of two twin students in my class wanted the book out, not just for their own kids, but for everyone else's too. They were concerned about a passage in Angelou's memoir where she was raped by her stepfather. Students need to know that this happened as young traumatized Maya stopped speaking. I wrote on the whiteboard the pages that the students didn't have to read, that they needed to know about. But of course, if you tell any teenager not that they don't have to do something, what are they going to do? The challenge followed the district policy for reconsideration of library materials to a T. And with the assistance of my union, I was supported along the way with additional time necessary to justify my choices, my curriculum, and simply to support me in this process that felt very scary to me as a young professional, as if I had done something to jeopardize my job, or as if I had done something wrong. The process culminated in a school board hearing where I testified, as did the concerned parents and each of the board members. And ultimately, the board voted with only one objection to retain I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, not only for classroom instruction, but for the memoir to remain on the shelves for students to select. So what I had dreaded became a celebration of the power of books, of the importance of having opportunities for students to have freedom to choose and learn, and for the important role that literature and our libraries play in our education. The children of the parents who initiated the challenge process did not read the book, as far as I know, and that is an important parental right to retain. But the rights of other parents and students were not infringed upon. I mentioned that I was pregnant in this book, when this book challenge occurred. And I had a toddler and went on the way, and as a young mom had only recently had this epiphany as a teacher. I had looked out to my students' faces, and I realized for the first time that they were loved in the same way that I loved, with the same fierceness that I love my little girl and the one on the way. And I better understood this desire to protect my precious children, and simultaneously my responsibility for my students, my own children, to learn and grow and tackle challenging, potentially unsettling, beautifully diverse topics through books. I trace this experience and the support of my union as the beginning of my pathway to leadership as the president of the Utah Education Association. So the mission of the Utah Education Association is to fulfill the promise of public education for each and every student. We elevate our profession and address working conditions that are student learning conditions so that our educators can be the best possible for our students. As we face a national wave of criticism aimed at our schools and our educators, including the selections that library professionals have made about the books available to the students, we must not lose sight of the impact on people. The librarians, the teachers, are committed and professionally trained. They have responsibilities and they have rights. Contracts must be followed, adopted policies adhered to, professional voices included and respected at every opportunity. After teaching high school English for many years, I obtained a library media license and had 16 amazing years in a junior high library. I can tell you firsthand that as professionals, we follow stringent processes for selection of materials. Our responsibility to the diverse needs, values, students, and communities we serve are evident in the materials available for students to select in their school libraries. And sometimes the values don't align, and sometimes mistakes are made, which is why all districts are required to have a process for reconsideration of materials. Parents always are the first step for choices regarding their own children, and alternatives are always available for classroom materials. But the highest level of stringency is the removal of materials and books from the library, as it should be, as this impacts not just your child's choices and options and rights, but everyone else's too. There is a wave of well-funded, well-organized attacks on our schools, and looking to remove library books from the shelves, either with the out-of-context shock value or attempts to rewrite sound policies for reconsideration, it is just one aspect of their plan. Our students, our children, and our library professionals deserve for us to have their backs and to not sit silent as books are removed, banned, deselected, or otherwise censored. The Utah Library Advocates eBook is an excellent guide. Read it, sign the petition, show up in the spaces that are currently being dominated by critics. Join me, the Utah Library Advocates, members of the Utah Education Association, in standing up for freedom, F-E-R-A-D, freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Tonight I'd like to invite up our next speaker, Jeanetta Williams, who is president of the NAACP Salt Lake chapter.
Thank you. Again, my name is Jeanetta Williams, president of the NAACP Salt Lake branch, as well as the Tri-State Conference for Idaho, Nevada, and Utah. The NAACP is supportive of the adopted processes to review books available in school libraries, particularly when concerns are raised about age appropriateness of material. However, as we are learning more about the books that currently are being removed from libraries, and especially in the Canyon School District, one of the reasons why we're here today and elsewhere, we find it extremely difficult to reconcile that the disproportionate targets are directed toward Black, Brown, and LGBTQ plus books and authors. We realize that each district has the responsibility through the professionalism of the library specialists and their curriculum departments to review all books that are in the classroom and the library, but we demand that reviews are done fairly in accordance to district policy and with a commitment to diverse opinions and voices. We need to have conversations about race, sexuality, gender, mental illness, and other taboo topics that are too often the reason books are challenged or banned. The NAACP Salt Lake branch supported the full statement recently issued by the Utah Library Association on 11/19/21, which includes the following. A parent has the right to determine what is best for their child, but they do not have the right to determine what is best for another child. As a result, when a book is challenged, it is entitled to due process for review by an objective body that assesses its merits in their entirety. By evaluating or revisiting any of these works prior to a formal challenge, we jeopardize our intellectual freedom and the procedure for protecting it, as well as subjecting ourselves to legal challenges, end quote. We're addressing not only what recently occurred in the Canyon School District, but with what is occurring across the entire state and across the country. We will not stand and let these hate groups make attempts to control what our children can and cannot read. They can control what happens in their own homes, but not others. The NAACP is the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization, nonpartisan, founded in 1909. And our mission is to secure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights in order to eliminate race-based discrimination and ensure the health and well-being of all persons. I'm also working with another group, the Ethnic Studies Coalition, which is a group of citizens who would like the Utah K-12 core standards to include every Utah family, ancestry, and culture in the learning to empower every student to more fully develop their capacity and sense of self. Again, we must honor the beauty, diversity that defines Utah's enduring legacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeanetta. Appreciate your comments. Now I'd like to welcome to the podium Amanda Darrow, who's Director of Youth, Family, and Education for the Utah Pride Center. Amanda? Thanks for being here.
Hi, my name is Amanda Darrow. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Youth, Family, and Education at the Utah Pride Center. Thank you to the Utah Library Association for having me here today to talk about the impact that censorship has on LGBTQIA+ students. Before the Utah Pride Center, I was in both elementary and higher education. I did my thesis on the effects of a heteronormative classroom environment on LGBTQ+ students. So this issue is close to my heart. This year, we've seen an attack on LGBTQIA+ literature in schools. The first time was in January, when Kyle Lukoff's picture book, Call Me Max, was read in a Murray City School District elementary school. The book is about a transgender child who reads the book is about a transgender child who shares his experiences as he navigates his identity in school and his community. The opposition to this book was that sex was being taught in a 3rd grade classroom, when in fact, sex was not being taught in the classroom, gender identity was. A lack of education around LGBTQIA+ identities has been a large push for censorship. Many individuals believe that when you say the words lesbian, gay, homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, and/or queer, that we're talking about sex. Talking about sexuality in schools is deemed taboo, unless of course the sexuality is heterosexual. Often, the discourse of heterosexuality is tied to love. So anything straight becomes love, and anything LGBTQIA+ is sex. When this happens, LGBTQIA+ identities are then seen as not age appropriate or appropriate at all for the classroom. When our identities are left out and LGBTQIA+ students face a heteronormative school environment, such as from censorship, the consequences are as followed: lower academic achievement, bullying, lack of family support, feelings of invisibility, social exclusion, mental health problems, and suicidality. We owe it to our LGBTQIA+ students to ensure that they are represented in our schools. We are not a cookie-cutter society. We need to teach that difference is permitted and sought after. We need to show our LGBTQIA+ students through books that they matter, they belong, and they are loved. If this is not part of our job as educators, then make it our responsibility as humans. Our stories belong in the classroom and on library shelves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I'd now like to welcome to the podium Troy Williams, the Executive Director of Equality Utah. Troy.
Hey, thank you, librarians. We are so grateful to you, and we love and appreciate the work that you're doing. Books save lives. They contain the stories, the myths, and the adventures that open us to the possibilities of who we are and what we can become. Throughout different eras, there have always been reactionary fear-mongers who seek to silence the voices of the novel and the unique. Even classics like Alice in Wonderland, To Kill a Mockingbird, Of Mice and Men were all banned. Moral panic, public hysteria rush people to ban books and blacklist artists. In the 90s, there was a moral panic about the children's book, Heather Has Two Mommies, which allowed a child of lesbian parents to finally, for the first time, see themselves reflected in literature. As Amanda mentioned, today the moral panic is about Call Me Max, which allows transgender and non-binary children to see their lives reflected on the page. So we hear a lot of talk today about cancel culture. I don't like it on the left or the right. I didn't like it in the early 2000s when these very same people were hosting CD burning parties of the band that was formerly called the Dixie Chicks. And I don't like it when they target American icons like Toni Morrison. Public school teachers and administrators have been targeted by an extremist faction who are determined to cancel the stories of minority children. We stand in solidarity with you and the thousands of public educators and administrators who every day are working to create a space in classrooms where minority students know that they are seen and that they belong. These children, and they are tens of thousands of students in Utah schools, who have every right to see themselves reflected in the pages on library shelves. Now, here is what we know about history. The more people try to ban books and censor speech and push certain authors underground, the more attractive you make it to the kids. And the more certain that these once heretical ideas will become mainstream. Now, the Romans tried to cancel Christianity, and look how that turned out. School libraries are a sanctuary that reflect the diversity of human experiences, so thank you to every one of you who is challenging the extremist waves of cancel culture targeting our youth. We will all be stronger, healthier, and feel more sane when the fever breaks and the culture war ends and we can get back to the essential work of educating the rising generations with the stories that uplift and inspire our greatness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Troy. Now please help me welcome up to the podium to share his thoughts Jim Wilson, who is a board member for School Library Pals. Jim? Come on, give a big warm up.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning to discuss the importance of school libraries. My name is James Wilson. I've worked in public education for 25 years, and I am a parent and a representative of School Library PALs, which is parents advocating for libraries in schools. 10 of my years in education I spent as a certified teacher librarian in Utah Middle School. And the last 4 years of my career I spent working as the District Library Media Specialist in Canyon School District. My remarks will be from the perspective and setting of a school library. I would like to discuss school libraries and school library staffing in general. I would then like to address the controversy over school library materials and how we should be looking at the issue. School libraries have been around for nearly as long as the formal school classroom. These school libraries at the time simply consisted of the teacher placing books of importance on their desk for students to access. The growth and development of the school library parallels the growth of our public libraries. The first professionally trained school librarian went to work in the state of New York in 1900. Since that time, the job of a school librarian has evolved, but not always in a positive way. There was a time when all school libraries employed a librarian who had their teaching certificate and formal school library endorsement via a college or university. Sadly, the certified teacher librarian position began to dwindle away in the 1980s and replaced with a non-certified and non-school library endorsed employee. Today in the state of Utah, there are only an estimated 215 certified teacher librarians, despite the fact that we have over 1,200 schools. Currently, there are only 3 school districts of Utah's 41 school districts who employ a certified teacher librarian in all levels of their schools, and many who employ no certified teacher librarian at all. Simply put, Utah school districts are not supporting their school libraries. In 2010, the Utah State Office of Education, in conjunction with a highly qualified team of certified teacher librarians, carefully created core standards to be taught in our school libraries. These standards include reading engagement, research and information, and media literacy, and they are incredibly important for the success of our students and our society going forth into the future. However, despite the creation of these invaluable standards, and despite the fact that our students are being hammered all day long with both good and bad information and media, we have pulled back on supporting these standards by not employing certified teacher librarians who have been trained to teach them. Yes, school librarians are charged with more than checking out books. First and foremost, they are teachers. Today's school libraries, certified teacher librarians, and library staff find themselves at the center of controversy due to the challenge of books and the accusations of peddling pornography. Through this storm of controversy, sadly, we have seen librarians and good district policies for selection and challenges thrown under the bus by some in their own school districts. Certified teacher librarians and library staffs do their best to select literature that will benefit all of their students. When a concern arises, school districts must follow their policy and not give in to the pressure to violate the constitutional rights of their patrons. Throughout history, the vast majority of challenges and removals have to do with any topic related to LGBTQ+ issues. I would like to point out that just because a book contains LGBTQ+ characters and storylines does not make it pornographic. If a book that contains stories, situations, and straight characters is considered appropriate, then the same book, written with LGBTQ+ stories, situations, and characters, does not become pornographic. Sadly, there are some who think this is the case. In every school district in our state, we have multitudes of students that are connected in some way to the LGBTQ+ community. Maybe they themselves are members of the community or are questioning who they are. Or perhaps they have same-sex parents or LGBTQ plus friends and family members. It is important for all of our students to see themselves in the books found in their school libraries. Contrary to stereotypes, falsehoods of the past, one cannot be recruited to become a member of the LGBTQ plus community just by reading a book. As a solution to this controversy and many others created by our information-rich world, school libraries must be looked at as a solution. We should be doing all we can to support school libraries so that they can help our students to develop a love of reading, become good researchers and users of information, and are literate to the dangers and benefits of the media. For all people who are concerned about student access to inappropriate materials, you should be charging forward in support of getting all school libraries staffed with a certified library endorsed educator, with a competent and professional staff, and supporting the mission to teach library standards of reading engagement, research and information, and media literacy. Our future depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate it. Next, we'd like to invite up Liz Pitts, who is president of the LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. Liz.
Good morning. I want to thank Salt Lake City Public Library for hosting this event today and Utah Library Advocates. And I also want to thank all of the fair-minded Utahns who are gathered together in this room today. My name is Liz Pitts. My pronouns are she, they. I am a proud parent of a 19-year-old non-binary amazing child, and I'm also a librarian. But I'm here today to speak to you as the president and CEO of the Utah LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce, and to speak out against censorship. I consider myself fortunate to live in a country which holds dear the ideals of intellectual freedom, the free flow of information, and freedom of speech, ideals which are the foundation of our democracy. I am honored to be speaking on behalf of the LGBTQ plus and allied business community in support of the libraries, which are currently under attack for promoting diverse viewpoints and ensuring that Utah's students have access to stories, information, and literature which reflect their lived experiences. As many of you know, the strongest and most resilient societies historically and today are those which educate and encourage their citizens to participate in a marketplace of ideas, in which the best ideas are determined through open competition with one another and not on the opinion of a censor. It is this marketplace which prepares students for success and ensures the economic and cultural well-being of our communities. Sadly, there exists a vocal minority in Utah today which is working to limit information about the lived experiences of LGBTQ plus and BIPOC citizens. Under the guise of moral rectitude, certain individuals believe that the centering of their ideas and the consequent erasure of marginalized community members' identities is justified and right. This simply is not true. What is true is that we are stronger when all people are able to access the information they need to determine the best paths for themselves. So I urge you today, speak out in support of libraries, stand up in support of all Utahns, and make an investment in the future of our great state.
Thank you very much, Liz. And our concluding speaker before we move to question and answer is Lehua Parker, who is the Literary Coordinator for Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resources. Lehua.
Aloha Amakea Kako. My name is Lehua Parker, and I'm here on behalf of PICTAR, Pacific Knowledge to Action Resources, and PAL Lit, the literary arm of Pacifica Enriching Arts of Utah. I'm an author of stories for kids and adults that are deeply embedded in Hawaiian culture, Native Hawaiian culture, and island culture. Do not let the blonde hair and blue eyes fool you. I am Kanaka Maoli, Native Hawaiian and a graduate of the Kamehameha schools. Today, you've heard my esteemed colleagues talk about the importance of school libraries and authentic representation. I'd like to take a moment and talk a little bit about this from the perspective of an author who writes stories for an underserved readership. As a child growing up in Hawaii, I never saw my family, friends, or neighbors represented in a book. And I know these books didn't exist because I was constantly on the prowl for them. I was a kid with their nose perpetually in a book. On a bus, at the beach, at soccer practice, it didn't matter. I had a book with me. But my family and friends weren't just invisible in books. It was all media. In the rare movie or television show, Islanders were always the exotic hula dancer, the bartender, or the crook. Never the center or hero of the story, never seen nor validated, and never without a cultural narrative created and imposed by Hollywood. Would it surprise you to learn that pineapple, coconut bras, and tiki curses like Bobby Brady faced are not Hawaiian? And don't get me started on pizza. I remember so vividly the first time I saw my community authentically represented in media. It left such a lasting impression on my life that when I decided to write my first novel, I knew it had to be about and for kids in Hawaii. That their authentic lives, experiences, and worldviews had to be firmly set in the center of the story. Now, I wish I could take all of you with me to Hawaii to see the impact these books have had on kids. I stood in crowded auditoriums with kids on the edge of their seats because they were so engaged with the idea that someone wrote a story about them and it was in a printed book. Auntie, they say, when you have that character say and do that thing, did you really mean? And yes, I tell them, I really did. More importantly, with a book in hand as proof, kids are thrilled by the possibility that they too can write their own stories and someone will read them. That they matter that much. I've talked with teachers, librarians, and parents, some with tears in their eyes, because for the first time, their hamana, their keiki, their students and children feel seen. For some kids, these books are the first ones they've read voluntarily in their entirety. Think about that for a moment. Reading is critical to success in school, in work, in a child's future, in our nation's future. Kids hunger to read books that speak to their lived experiences. Why would we do anything to discourage that? I want you to know that I recognize that not all books are for all kids. However, we have public processes that help us determine which books are appropriate for which grades in our communities, and it is imperative that these processes are followed. It is chilling to think that people believe we can circumvent proper review processes by bullying others into removing books from circulation simply because a book is not right for their child. All school libraries must have books that represent the entirety of their communities. It is truly a matter of life and death. It is a matter of being seen. Mahalo nui loa. Ame aloha no. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Lehua. Before we move to question and answer, I'm going to take the MC's privilege of just sharing sort of an unplanned personal comment. So I grew up as a kid, and I learned to read, loved to read, partly through reading Peanuts, comic strip, Charles Schulz. Any Peanuts fans in the audience here? Complex comic, dealing with a lot of different, rather adult issues at times. And every year for my birthday, my wife gives me a box set of Peanuts collection that's just beautiful. And so I just had a 55th birthday a few weeks ago, and I got a box set of Peanuts. And in each one of these, there's an introduction written by a different person who also loves Peanuts. And in this collection, the introduction was written by Al Roker. Al Roker is a meteorologist and a host of the Today Show. And he talked about growing up as a young black child in New York, and also loved Peanuts. And the impact that comic strip had when the character of Franklin was introduced in July of 1968. For the first time, he saw a depiction of himself in this comic that he loved, and almost was surprised by how meaningful that was, and how the lack of that representation became so stark. And he later in his life got to interview Charles Schulz soon, actually a few days before he passed away, and he just shared how meaningful that was to have that depiction of Franklin, a young black character in the comic strip. And Charles Schulz said that when he introduced that, that he got, and of course, angry letters from all over the country and newspapers that threatened to pull the comic strip from the newspapers because of complaints. Now, if you see the first comic strip with Franklin, he's on the beach with Charlie Brown, and they're building a sandcastle. And he's saying, "Is this your lost beach ball?" And then in the next one, he's shaking Linus's hand, and Linus is saying, "It's so nice to meet you." What about that would lead someone to object, to say, "We're not going to carry your comic strip in our newspaper"? It is the mere depiction of the existence of a young black child on the beach playing, or sitting at a desk in school with other students. And I am afraid that the same motivation that existed in July of 1968, the motivation to simply erase the depiction of the existence of a human being and the human being's experience, is at the absolute core of what is happening today. Regardless of whatever rhetoric and things that are taken out of context for shock value and to scare us, it comes down to some people simply want to remove the existence of other people from their reality and from the perception of their kids' reality. That's what it comes down to. So I wasn't planning on getting into that, but it was fermenting while these other amazing speakers were sharing their stories. So, with that, we'll move to question and answer. Yes, and we'll invite all our speakers to, if you have a question.
It's for anyone. So since I've been covering the situation in canyons, one thing that's clear, I interviewed the people who are the one who's objecting. They're not reading the material.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the material in total. It's this idea that somehow this will be a corrupting influence on children, not just their children, but all children. And I guess my question to the people who've spoken really eloquently about the role of a library and public education, like how do you counter that? Like what do you do about that when we're not discussing specifics in a book, this is the problem, these are the pages. It is this idea that these books that they're not even willing to read are offensive and should go away, and the policies that are in place, everyone's talked about, are not even being followed. And I would say that we only know about some situations. There's lots that we don't know about. And so I just wondered, like, how do you have these conversations or stand up for this literature as professionals in this universe when the battleground seems to be not what you all are. You are fighting a different war than they are fighting, from my perspective, on the sideline.
Thank you for the question. I'd like to offer a really geeky answer and then invite my colleagues to offer, particularly my school library colleagues and teachers, to respond to that. So preface, I'm not a lawyer, but the law says that to determine whether something is a protected speech, including books in a library, there's a three-part test, one of which is taken as a whole. Does it have significant literary, artistic, what's the P in that? Scientific or value. So taken as a whole. So literally, unless you read the whole entire work, there is no legal basis for making any determination that material, which has the benefit of First Amendment protection, should lose that benefit. So courts say that speech and publications have the benefit of the doubt that they're protected unless otherwise failing that three-part test. And these materials, so if someone says, I'm just showing you this one line or these couple lines, there's no basis for it. And any library board or school administrator that removes materials without going through their own publicly passed process, a process that is public, that is transparent, that is consultative with all members of the community. There's an opportunity for parents and everyone in the community to say, this is our input on the policy. If they don't follow that policy, or if they remove anything that does not taken as a whole meet, or that does taken as a whole meet that test, then they're going to be in some legal hot water, and that's going to be the taxpayers on the hook for those legal bills. And if you look around, if you're following the stories around the country, you see in York or in where it was most recently Kansas, North Kansas school system, there was a third one where they pull the books, and then they literally have said, well, our lawyers tapped us on the shoulder and told us that was unconstitutional, so we're putting the books back now. So that's the geeky legal answer, but that's this.
And then you illustrate, like, to me, kind of the crux of this is, which is, that's the like, but if you don't know, were it not for one courageous librarian in Kansas District, you don't know those books are pulled.
Well, and the scary thing is that we, anecdotally, we know that there's chilling effect, and that I would imagine that part of the goal and the end game of some of the people challenging is to create that chilling effect so that people will start self-censoring, so that they don't wind up in the newspaper and they don't have to have hours of their day going to defending these things, etc. And we know that that's happening too. Heidi, anyone else who wants to address that?
And I would just like to add that that's why organizations like this exist. That's why we're here today, bringing our collective voices, our collective power and influence to be able to bring people to spaces where the louder voices are really drowning them out. As the Utah Education Association, as I said, we exist for the promise of public education for all of our students, and that relies upon having proficient, motivating, excellent educators in our classrooms and in our libraries. And through a professional organization, we're able to bring those voices together and have power and influence when things are violated through a grievance process, through a lawsuit. We are in communication with the ACLU, whose very job it is to identify situations. But I think that situations where rights are being infringed upon. That said, very supportive of the procedures that are in place for reconsideration of materials. And as I had mentioned, my experience of going through that was profound in what it did to the community and bringing people together. So again, just coming back to the collective voices and the reason that our organizations exist and the reasons that we are in collaboration and here today is to elevate that and stand together. So, thank you.
I would like to add that we just need to redirect that parental energy. Instead of parents focusing on books that they don't want in the library, I believe they should be creating lists of books that they do want in the library. They should send their students to libraries with lists of books that they approve of, that they want their child to read, so that child can check them out and have a reading experience, and not worry so much about what's in somebody else's backpack. Books don't do anything. It's the experience that a reader has with a book that transfers knowledge. And they're not even taking the time to understand what's in a book. So again, I say they need to focus on finding literature that feeds their souls, that feeds their children, and promote those. Thank you.
So in reference to your question, I resigned from Canyon School District in June as the district library specialist, and I was the specialist involved in the creation of what was a policy that was not adhered to, sadly. But I want people to be aware that there was a new policy in the school district created, amended from a prior one. I think we had inherited actually from Georgia School District before we split. And we had nearly a year-long process where we met with our district's legal team. We had 4 or 5 of our certified librarians involved in that process, and we met often to go through that. And we were very much interested because I think we all agree with parents' rights to advocate for their children, but we also need to protect all children. And so what we were trying to do was create a policy that was sound and hopefully that would be followed so that if a book challenge did come up, the school board would then send it through the process. And sadly, that's not what happens. And you are correct also that there are often times where our library personnel are just told by their administrators, you will remove that book. And that's a scary idea as well. So just a little history and context to what happened with that. And the policy was new when it was not followed. So thank you.
To Jim's comment about teachers and librarians being ordered to remove books, there's also, as well as just being bullied by members of the public, there's also a dignity of work question here. I mean, I think like many people in this room, if you're a member of the press, if you work for a nonprofit, if you work in public service, we didn't go into this work to get rich, to buy a yacht. We all got into this work because we care very deeply about people and about our country, right? I mean, that's why we all get out of bed in the morning. It's a sense of service, and it's a sense of service to others and a sense of service to core principles of our American democracy, of our republic. So when we have teachers and librarians who are being bullied and are fearful for their jobs, simply because they are doing their jobs, difficult jobs, not well-paid jobs often, there's a dignity of work issue involved as well. Yeah.
Since we were talking about the Canyons case, which of course has been, the newest iteration of all of this, do any of you have any update on where things are at with that, and what would you like to see happen in that specific situation?
I'm looking at it, but I don't have any updates. I can tell you what I'd like to see happen.
But
Sorry. I'll just add that the first reading of the proposed changes to the policy was November 30th, I believe. The second reading is tonight. And then there have been further changes to that. I know that the Utah Library Advocates have given a fair bit of input on that policy and the changes. I think some of the key concerns are the addition of a review policy instead of going to a straight challenge. And that review policy could potentially, at a school level, circumvent the thorough vetting of a book. I think there was a concern.
It could take a book out of circulation, right? The district level?
Yes, and I mean, I don't want to speak for the Canyons or anyone, just maybe from my...
No, but from the librarians, they were saying that the district level challenge could take a book out of circulation before it's fully reviewed. Which is contrary to the...
What it does is it creates a review system.
Yeah.
That is at a school level and then a district level, and then if things are not satisfied, it goes to the but again, I don't want to speak for for Canyons there at all. That's pretty much what I know about it. I think that there will be a third reading, which is generally when policies are adopted. That is scheduled for early January.
I'm going to do more. I'm not a lawyer stuff here. So the Supreme Court has ruled, the courts have ruled that even in school libraries, materials have a very high level of protection of the First Amendment, and that removing something or even moving something to a different section can't be done unless there's a significant compelling interest, I believe is the legal term, and that even then you have to use the least restrictive, least burdensome approach. So, which is all to say that if they're going to try to pass a policy that removes a book while something is under review, I sincerely doubt that will meet legal constitutional muster, and if they're talking to their attorneys, if their attorneys are worth a dime, they'll be telling them the same thing. And I'm not an attorney. And so as far as what I'd like to see happen is I would like to see policies that are being developed in accordance with the law, with respect and regard to all Utahns and the experience of all the kids, and with an understanding of the importance and value of kids being able to read about and see depictions of their own lives and their own families.
Those 9 books, though, they remain off the shelves, right? In that particular district? That is-
As far as I know.
No one's here from the district.
No.
Yeah, I don't
That's
know.
my understanding, but I'm not sure.
We can either confirm or deny, but we think so.
And overall, have you all seen, do you have any like numerical, have you seen an increase overall in these challenges? And is there any data on that you'd be able to share with us? You know, in a wider sense, not just that one particular case.
Yeah, we don't have that at our fingertips. The American Library Association is tracking that, and that's certainly something we can send out. If we have all of your emails and you're interested in that statistic, we'll probably pull it up.
Do you have anything Utah specific? Does that-
Oh, Utah specific?
Anyone track that?
In terms of,
Nationwide, I've heard 67% increase, but I don't know about Utah.
yeah. But if we can get that statistic for you, we can talk to, see if, the American Library Association might have that statistic based on states, but again, that would be official challenges, and I think part of what we're all concerned about, and we hear anecdotally, is that unofficial pressure that teacher librarians and other library staff are getting from their administrators that are not making it to the newspaper.
And that there's been an increase in that this year in particular, right?
Yeah, again, that's anecdotal. I mean, the only thing that we would know for sure is that there's been an official challenge and someone's picked up the phone and called the Office of Intellectual Freedom at the American Library Association to report it.
Anecdotally, Wanda Mayhoff Faker has told me that she gets contacted every day with regarding challenges in Utah.
So, and that's a librarian who is very involved with our intellectual freedom. So she said, to repeat for the mics, that she's getting calls every day from librarians who are saying that there's challenges happening. Yes?
You're releasing this new eBook for parents to navigate this, complicated issue on censorship. Will it be enough to really address this issue that has been ongoing?
Well, this issue's been ongoing, I think, since humans first got together, in community. And there's always a push-pull and a tug-of-war between people's value systems and things like that. So all we can do is try to move the conversation forward in a way that's positive, constructive, helpful, and aligned with our democratic values, and also in a way that's going to help parents to help their kids be successful.
A lot of these recommendations focus on, parents and caretakers. What are the recommendations when a student finds, a material in a book inappropriate? What are those recommendations?
I'm looking for my teacher librarians. Davina. Yeah, can you?
I said the ebook primarily focuses on parents and caretakers having these conversations about what happens when a student finds some material inappropriate in a book, and how do you what recommendations are there to students?
So personally, when I was in a school library, at the beginning of every year we do an orientation, and I taught my students to what are some of the things you can do when you come across a book that makes you uncomfortable. You can skip the page, you can turn the book back in, and most importantly, go have a conversation with your parents about it. So every book is not going to feel the same to every child. And as a school librarian, I wanted to make sure that I provided a variety of books to meet all of my students. This morning, I sat in a conference with Granite School District librarians, and a librarian shared an email she received this morning from a transgender student who said she doesn't feel safe, and the only place she feels safe is in the library. So without getting emotional, that speaks to me. Like, as a librarian, I want to make sure that each of those students can find something in their library that they can relate to. And I also want other students to have perspective of their peers that they're interacting with. So I'm probably elaborating too much, but
Davina, can I just follow up? Are these challenges coming from kids?
no,
That's the answer, no.
no.
I'm a former teen librarian. I don't think I mentioned, but next year will be my 30th year as a librarian, and I've worked municipal and state and federal and teen and law libraries, etc. So, but there's two phrases that I have heard over and over again, and I know that many librarians have heard these same two phrases as well, especially if they've worked with kids or teens. One, safe haven. Those two words I've heard over and over again, and sometimes I hear it from the teen. Most recently, I heard it from a teen who, well, I won't go into the whole anecdote, but she was going through a difficult period in her life that involved the death of a family member and a divorce, and safe haven. The library was my safe haven. And sometimes I've heard it from adults who said, oh, when I was a teen, the library was my safe haven. And the other phrase I've heard multiple times, even from someone in my own family, is the library saved my life. The library saved my life. And I don't think they mean it figuratively, literally, right? Because either the access to the books, the materials, the ideas that confirmed that they had a place in the world, maybe a safe place where their home wasn't a safe place, and often it was a relationship with a librarian, teacher, a library worker who just looked at that child and communicated and connected with that child as if they had a reason to be on the planet without judgment. So, I forgot what the question was, but that was my answer.
Is there any data that, like, when they do protest these books to take them out, or say these books are bad, is there any protests or data on who's actually read it through?
So the question is there data when books are challenged on who's actually read it through? I'm not aware of that data being collected, but yeah. Davina?
I really don't like talking at this microphone. I get really nervous. So Granite School District particularly, I can speak to that. We've had a few challenges. I don't believe that our parents have read the books that they're challenging, but luckily our reconsideration committee, they have been reading the book, and we've been seeing some success in terms of that, where I've been seeing minds shifted in a positive way. So I think once you read the book in its entirety, your impression changes significantly, and I encourage that to any parent that comes in that questions the book. I encourage that they read it, or we provide a different book for a child, and so yes, I'm gonna stop talking now.
Other questions? Yes.
I'm just reading really briefly through, the ebook. One of the main focal points is, having these conversations with children about, potential books. What other recommendations are there to give to caretakers and parents about, this issue?
So the question is that, your name, I'm sorry? Ivana has been reading through the ebook and sees that there's information for parents and caretakers on how to talk to kids about books, and are there other recommendations?
Yeah. So it seems that the main focal point is having conversations with children about this issue. What other recommendations are there, for parents to really navigate through this issue?
Tricia. Tricia Fenton, come on up to the mic. So, yeah. Tricia Fenton is the president of UELMA.
Right, so I would just like to speak to that, because one of the things that we advocate for really strongly with parents and with caretakers is that they have those conversations with their children, but also that they teach their children to talk to the librarians, right? As a school librarian, I've had a lot of students come to me, like maybe 5, right? Okay, but I've had these students come to me and they say, I don't want to read a book that has on page 6 in it, or I don't want to read a book that has this in it, or I don't want to read a book that has that in it. And as a librarian, I have to know what resources I have that are going to meet those expectations for that student. And I'm happy to do that. I also have students that come to me and they're like, I just want to read a book that has great queer characters. And I can recommend those books too, because I love those also. I read avidly so that I can support these students. And that's what we want our parents to know. We want them to know that they can come and talk to their students and that we as librarians are going to support those conversations they're having at home, right? That's our objective. We also want to make sure that any decisions made about our collection are being made from a place of strength and not from fear or paranoia, right? That's probably the biggest thing I think that we're concerned about as school librarians, is we don't want to have any decisions made about books in our libraries that are being made based off of, oh, I'm afraid if a student reads that, what might happen to them? Or I'm afraid that it's going to do this. We need to be making rational decisions based off of well-respected reviews, well-respected opinions of people in our community, multiple people, multiple perspectives. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay.
Thank you, Tricia. Are there other questions? I was trained to wait for 10 full seconds. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, I would just like to conclude by thanking you all for being here with us today, members of the press, colleagues, community partners. Really appreciate your willingness to spend some time and engage in this conversation with us. So thank you very much. There is, if you have parking, there is validated, you always have the parking. There's validated parking upstairs in the library for 2 hours. So if you have your parking ticket, you can get that validated. Thank you again.